The wind carried dust across the barren Texas landscape as Willow Summers clutched the letter that would change her life forever, her heart racing at the thought of leaving behind everything she had ever known to journey west. It was 1876, a time of both opportunity and danger, especially for a woman traveling alone. At 22, she had little choice but to accept her late father's partner's invitation to come to Dallas and claim her inheritance, the half of their cattle business that rightfully belonged to her family. The stagecoach ride had been grueling, 5 days of constant jostling over rough terrain, but Willow was no stranger to hardship. Having lost both parents to influenza the previous winter, she had managed their small farm in Missouri alone for months before receiving Mr. Thompson's letter. "Last stop before Dallas," the driver called out as they approached a small trading post. "1 hour to stretch your legs and get refreshments." Willow stepped down carefully, smoothing her travel-worn dress. The small settlement consisted of a general store, saloon, and a few scattered buildings. After purchasing a cup of water and a small piece of bread, she wandered to the edge of the settlement, eager to escape the leering glances of trail-worn cowboys. The view from the ridge was breathtaking. Rolling hills gave way to distant mountains, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the landscape. Willow took a step closer to the edge, wanting to see more of the country that would soon be her home. That was when disaster struck. The loose rocks beneath her boots gave way without warning. Scree, the unstable accumulation of broken rock fragments, shifted treacherously under her weight. Willow's arms windmilled desperately as she lost her footing, a scream catching in her throat as she began sliding toward the steep drop-off. "Don't move," a deep voice commanded. Willow froze, terror coursing through her veins as small rocks continued tumbling down the hillside. She dared not look behind her, focusing instead on the 30-foot drop that awaited if she slid any further. "Count to 5, the man's voice came again, steady and controlled. "Step where I step." Willow remained motionless, her breath coming in short gasps. Through her fear, she heard boots crunching carefully across the loose stone. A tall figure moved into her peripheral vision, a cowboy with sun-bronzed skin and a determined expression. "Name's Grant Galloway," he said, extending his hand while bracing himself against a sturdy boulder. "I need you to trust me, madam." "Willow," she managed to whisper. "Willow Summers." "Miss Summers, I'm going to get you off this ledge. Count to 5 in your mind before each step. Slow and steady. Follow my path exactly." Willow nodded, her throat too dry for words. Grant moved with precision, testing each footfall before committing his weight. "Here," he directed, pointing to a stable rock. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then step." Willow followed his instructions, counting silently as sweat beaded on her forehead. Each careful movement brought her inches away from disaster. When a rock slipped beneath her boot, sending pebbles cascading down the cliff face, Grant's hand shot out, catching her wrist in an iron grip. "I've got you," he said, his eyes green as summer grass locked on hers. "Keep counting." 5 more agonizing minutes passed before they reached solid ground. Willow's legs gave way immediately, and she sank to the earth, trembling with delayed shock. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to look up at the man who had saved her life. "I was being foolish." Grant knelt beside her, offering his canteen. "Not foolish, just unfamiliar with the territory. That ridge has claimed more experienced travelers than yourself." As Willow drank, she studied her rescuer. He was perhaps 28, with a lean, muscular build earned through hard work rather than leisure. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, and though he carried a pistol at his hip, he lacked the menacing air of the men who had leered at her from the saloon porch. "Are you headed to Dallas?" he asked, helping her to her feet. Willow nodded. "I am. My father's business partner has summoned me. I'm to take over my family's half of their cattle operation." Grant's eyebrows rose slightly. "Thompson and Summers Ranch." "Yes." Willow's surprise was evident. "How did you know?" A shadow crossed Grant's face. "I've worked cattle drives from that operation for the past 2 years. Your father was a good man, Miss Summers. His passing was felt by many." The stagecoach driver's call interrupted their conversation. Willow reluctantly moved toward the waiting coach, turning back to thank Grant once more. "Will I see you in Dallas?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Grant adjusted his hat. "I expect you will. I'm heading that direction myself after I conclude some business here." He hesitated, then added, "Be careful with Thompson, Miss Summers. Not all business partners honor their obligations to the departed." Before she could ask what he meant, Grant tipped his hat and strode away, leaving Willow with more questions than answers as the stage coach lurched forward toward Dallas. 3 days later, Willow stood in Henry Thompson's opulent office, struggling to maintain her composure as he explained the unfortunate circumstances of her inheritance. "Your father made some poor investments before his passing," Thompson said, not meeting her eyes. "I'm afraid the half of the business that would have been yours is now mortgaged to cover those debts." "That's impossible," Willow protested. "My father was meticulous with finances. He wrote to me about the record profits just months before he fell ill." Thompson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I have the documentation here," he said, sliding papers across his massive oak desk. "You're welcome to stay on as a guest, of course. Perhaps we can find you a position as a housekeeper or cook." Humiliation burned through Willow. She had traveled over 1,000 miles only to be offered a servant's position in what should have been her own home. Rising to her feet, she gathered her dignity around her like armor. "I'll need time to review these documents," she said coldly. "Of course, my dear," Thompson replied with false sympathy. "Take all the time you need. My housekeeper will show you to your room." Dallas in summer was mercilessly hot. Willow spent 3 days reviewing the paperwork Thompson had provided, growing increasingly convinced that the documents were forgeries. Her father's signature looked slightly wrong, and the dates of certain transactions didn't align with the letters he had sent her. On the 4th day, she ventured into town, hoping to find the bank where her father had conducted business. As she walked down the dusty main street, a familiar figure emerged from the sheriff's office. "Miss Summers," Grant Galloway called, touching the brim of his hat. "I see you arrived safely." "Mr. Galloway," Willow acknowledged, relief washing over her at seeing a familiar face. "Yes, though I'm afraid the welcome was less than warm." Grant's expression darkened. "Thompson gave you trouble about the inheritance. He claims my father left nothing but debts." Grant's jaw tightened. "Would you join me for coffee? There are matters we should discuss away from prying ears." The small cafe at the edge of town offered relative privacy. Over strong black coffee, Grant confirmed her worst fears. "Thompson has been systematically looting the ranch since before your father's death," he said in a low voice. "I've been gathering evidence for the past 6 months working with the sheriff." "Why would you do that?" Willow asked. "You hardly knew my father." Grant stared into his coffee. "My father was Samuel Galloway. He and your father were original partners before Thompson bought him out 15 years ago. When my father died last year, I came looking for work, curious about the operation he helped build." "What happened to your father's share?" "Thompson claimed my father sold it all, but I never saw a cent from that sale." Grant's voice was tight with old anger. "When I started noticing discrepancies in the books, I realized Thompson had likely cheated both our families." Willow felt a kinship with this man who had lost as much as she had. "What do we do now?" "The sheriff needs more evidence," Grant explained. "Thompson is powerful in Dallas. He owns half the businesses and has the mayor in his pocket. We need indisputable proof." "The ledgers," Willow said suddenly. "My father always kept duplicate ledgers hidden in case of fire. He would have continued the practice here." Grant's eyes lit up. "Do you know where he might have kept them?" "No, but I know my father. He would have hidden them somewhere only family would think to look." That night, Willow slipped out of her room at Thompson's mansion and made her way to what had been her father's study. Thompson had converted it to a trophy room, displaying mounted heads of buffalo and deer. Methodically, she searched every hiding place she could imagine behind books, beneath floorboards, inside hollow table legs. Just as dawn approached, she noticed something odd about her father's old desk. Though Thompson had replaced it with a grander one, the old piece had been moved to a corner rather than discarded. Running her hands along its underside, she felt a small lever. When pressed, a hidden compartment opened in what appeared to be a solid drawer front. Inside lay 3 leather-bound ledgers and a letter addressed to her. Willow tucked the books into her skirt and returned to her room just as the household began stirring. She spent the morning poring over the ledgers, which confirmed her suspicions. Thompson had been embezzling funds for years, recording false expenses and pocketing the difference. Her father's letter was dated just 2 weeks before his death. "My dearest Willow, if you are reading this, I fear the worst has happened. Thompson has been acting strangely of late, questioning my travel plans and showing unusual interest in my correspondence with you. I've discovered discrepancies in our accounts that can only be explained by deliberate malfeasance. I've confronted him once, and his reaction convinced me to take precautions. These ledgers contain the truth. Take them to Judge William Parker in Fort Smith. If anything happens to me, he is beyond Thompson's influence. All my love, Father." With shaking hands, Willow hid the letter and waited for nightfall to meet Grant. "We need to leave immediately," she told him when they met at the stable behind the Silver Dollar Saloon. "My father suspected foul play before his death. I think Thompson may have had him killed." Grant's face hardened. "That fits with what I've learned. Thompson hired a man named Ellis to handle a problem in Missouri last winter, right around when your parents fell ill. Influenza is rarely so convenient in its timing," Willow said bitterly. "The sheriff won't move against Thompson without more proof than account books," Grant warned. "We need to get you to Fort Smith." "What about you?" Grant's smile was grim. "I'm coming with you. Thompson knows I've been asking questions. It's not safe for either of us here anymore." They left that night, riding hard toward the east. Grant had mapped a route that avoided main roads, taking them through rough country where Thompson's men would be less likely to follow. 3 days into their journey, disaster struck again. The mountain pass Grant had chosen required them to traverse a steep, rocky slope. The recent rain had made the trail treacherous, loose rocks shifting under their horses' hooves. "Take it slow," Grant called back to Willow. "This stretch is dangerous." Willow followed carefully, her borrowed mare picking her way delicately across the scree-covered slope. They were halfway across when they heard riders approaching from below. "Thompson's men," Grant said grimly, recognizing the lead rider. "They're cutting us off." Willow urged her horse forward, hoping to reach the relative safety of the forest on the other side of the pass. The mare, sensing her urgency, moved too quickly across the unstable terrain. Suddenly, the ground gave way beneath them. Willow felt herself falling as the horse stumbled, throwing her from the saddle. She landed hard on the slope, immediately beginning to slide down toward the approaching riders. Loose rocks cascaded around her as she desperately sought purchase on the treacherous scree. "Willow." Grant's voice cut through her panic. He had dismounted and was making his way toward her, moving with the same careful precision he'd demonstrated during their first meeting. "Don't move," he commanded, seeing her struggling. "Count to 5, step where I step." Freezing in place, Willow watched as Grant navigated the slope toward her. Her heart pounded as rocks continued to slide past her position. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, she whispered, following his lead as he guided her toward a more stable area of the slope. The riders below had spotted them. A shot rang out, the bullet ricocheting off a boulder near Grant's head. "We need to move faster," he urged, abandoning caution. He reached Willow's side and pulled her to her feet. "Run when I tell you. Stay directly behind me." Together they scrambled across the slope, Grant deliberately loosening rocks to create small avalanches that impeded their pursuers. When they reached the tree line, he pulled her behind a massive pine. "My horse is gone," Willow gasped. "We'll make it on foot," Grant assured her, checking his pistol. "There's a ranger station 2 miles north. We can get help there." Another shot splintered bark inches from Willow's head. Grant returned fire, forcing Thompson's men to seek cover. "Go," he ordered. "I'll hold them off." "I won't leave you," Willow protested. Grant's eyes met hers, something unspoken passing between them. "I'll be right behind you, I promise." Reluctantly, Willow plunged into the forest, the ledgers secure in her saddlebag slung over her shoulder. She ran until her lungs burned, following the rough trail Grant had described. Behind her, the sporadic crack of gunfire gradually faded. The ranger station appeared just as Willow feared her strength would give out. A grizzled man in a buckskin jacket emerged, rifle at the ready. "Please," she gasped. "Men are pursuing us. My friend is holding them off." The ranger, who introduced himself as Jeremiah, quickly ushered her inside the small cabin. "How many men?" he asked, already loading a second rifle. "4, maybe 5, Willow replied, collapsing onto a rough-hewn chair. "They work for Henry Thompson of Dallas." Jeremiah's eyes narrowed. "Thompson's reach is long, but this is federal land. His influence ends at my doorstep." He handed Willow a cup of water before taking position at the window. Minutes stretched into an hour with no sign of Grant or their pursuers. Just as Willow was preparing to go searching, a figure emerged from the trees. Grant was limping badly, his shirt torn and bloodied, but alive. Willow ran to him, supporting him as he stumbled the final distance to the cabin. "Thompson's men?" Jeremiah asked as they helped Grant inside. "2 turned back. 2 won't be turning anywhere ever again," Grant said grimly, wincing as he sank onto a bench. Willow examined his injuries, a bullet graze along his ribs and a deep cut on his thigh from a fall. As she cleaned and bandaged his wounds, Grant explained their situation to Jeremiah. "Judge Parker needs to see these ledgers," he concluded. "Thompson has been stealing from half the territory, not just us." Jeremiah nodded thoughtfully. "I can get word to the territorial marshal. He can provide an escort to Fort Smith." That night, as Grant slept off his injuries, Willow sat by the fire with Jeremiah, learning about the land they had fled through. "This country forgives no mistakes," the old ranger said, gesturing to the mountains visible through the window, "but it rewards those who respect its power." "Grant knew that," Willow said softly. "When I first met him, I was about to fall off a cliff. He told me to count to 5 before each step, to follow exactly where he stepped. It saved my life then and again today." "Smart man," Jeremiah commented. "Patience is the difference between life and death out here." 2 days later, with Grant's strength returning, the territorial marshal arrived with 3 deputies. After reviewing the evidence, he agreed to escort them to Fort Smith. "Thompson won't stop coming after you," the marshal warned. "Men like him don't surrender power easily." "We'll be ready," Grant said, his hand finding Willow's. The journey to Fort Smith took 8 days. During the long hours on horseback, Willow and Grant's relationship deepened. She learned about his childhood in Kansas, his years working cattle drives across the territory, and his dream of reclaiming his father's legacy. In turn, she shared stories of her parents, her education at a ladies' seminary in St. Louis, and her determination to honor her father's memory. By the time they reached Fort Smith, something profound had grown between them, a bond forged in shared danger and mutual respect. Judge Parker, a stern man with penetrating eyes, listened carefully to their story, examining the ledgers with methodical precision. "This is enough to issue warrants," he finally announced. "Thompson will face charges of fraud, embezzlement, and if we can prove it, murder." "What about our property?" Willow asked. "Even if Thompson is convicted, how do we prove what rightfully belongs to us?" The judge smiled thinly. "Your father was wiser than Thompson gave him credit for. He filed papers with this court establishing the original partnership agreements. Between those documents and these ledgers, we can restore what was stolen from both your families." 3 months later, Willow stood on the porch of the newly rechristened Galloway Summers ranch outside Dallas. The territorial marshal had made good on his promise. Henry Thompson now occupied a cell awaiting trial, his empire dismantled, his stolen assets returned to their rightful owners. The ranch was flourishing under new management. Grant had proven himself an excellent cattleman, while Willow's education and meticulous attention to detail made her a formidable business partner. Together, they had rebuilt what their fathers had started. "Penny for your thoughts," Grant said, joining her on the porch as sunset painted the Texas sky in brilliant oranges and purples. I was thinking about how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't lost my footing on that ridge the day we met, Willow replied. If you hadn't been there to tell me to count to 5 and step where you stepped, Grant's hand found hers, his touch now familiar and cherished. Some might call that fate. Do you believe in fate, Mr. Galloway? Willow asked, turning to face him. I believe in making your own path, he answered, his green eyes serious. But I also believe some paths are meant to cross. The evening breeze carried the scent of wildflowers as Grant knelt before her, producing a small silver ring. Willow Summers, these past months have shown me what kind of woman you are: brave, intelligent, and stronger than anyone I've ever known. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears blurred Willow's vision as she nodded, words momentarily beyond her reach. When Grant slipped the ring onto her finger, she found her voice again. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. Their wedding took place the following spring, with Jeremiah the ranger serving as Grant's best man and Judge Parker presiding. The ranch hands and neighboring families gathered to celebrate, transforming the barn into a flower-filled hall for dancing afterward. As Willow and Grant swayed together under lantern light, she reflected on how far they had come from that precarious Scree slope where they first met. What are you smiling about, Mrs. Galloway? Grant murmured against her hair. I was just thinking that life is rather like crossing that dangerous slope, she replied. Sometimes you need someone to remind you to count to 5 and step where they step. Grant's arms tightened around her. I'll always be that someone for you. 5 years later, the Galloway Summers Ranch had become one of the most successful operations in Texas. Their innovative breeding programs and fair treatment of workers had earned them respect throughout the territory. Willow sat in the shade of the broad oak tree behind their expanded home, watching as Grant taught their 4-year-old son Samuel and 2-year-old daughter Elizabeth how to approach a gentle old mare. Count to 5 before you move closer, he instructed patiently. Animals can sense when you're rushing. Samuel, a serious child with his father's green eyes, dutifully counted aloud before taking a careful step toward the horse. Elizabeth, too young to truly understand, simply mimicked her brother, her dark curls bouncing as she exaggeratedly counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The sight filled Willow's heart with contentment. Their life wasn't without challenges: drought seasons, cattle rustlers, and the occasional reminder of Thompson's remaining allies, but they faced each obstacle together, with the same steady patience that had saved her life on that fateful day. When Grant joined her under the tree, children now happily feeding carrots to the delighted mare, Willow leaned against his shoulder. Do you ever wonder what might have happened if you hadn't been there that day on the ridge? She asked. Grant considered this for a moment. I believe we would have found each other eventually, he said. Some things are just meant to be, like counting to 5, Willow teased. Exactly like counting to 5, Grant agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Sometimes the most important lessons are the simplest ones. As the Texas sun began its descent, painting the sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, the Galloway family gathered on their porch. The children played at their feet while Grant and Willow sat side by side in matching rocking chairs, their hands intertwined. From disaster had come their greatest joy, from danger their deepest bond. What began with a near-fatal misstep on treacherous Scree had become a love story written across the wild Texas landscape, a testament to patience, courage, and the power of taking life one careful step at a time.